Talk and scroll. Talk and scroll. Talk and scroll.
Hey, what's going on? This is TNS Time and Space, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Talk and Scroll. Before we begin, I would invite you to like, comment, and subscribe, and make sure you hit that bell notification so you can be made aware of any time that I post new content. But anyway, now that the housekeeping is done, I came across this post and I wanted to talk and scroll. So let's look at it. Men, I'm going to help y'all out. You guys are failing miserably at a lot of basic stuff, or a lot of this basic stuff. I've said this before on my page. It's been a few years, but let's recap. Okay, first and foremost, it's interesting how the main focus is usually the worst of us. And that goes both ways. It's normally the worst women, quote unquote, or the worst men who get the most attention, to be honest. And I'm a strong believer in the idea that what you focus on expands. So starting right off the bat with, you guys are failing miserably. That to me is like, well, speak it into existence. You're going to continue to attract what you put out into the world. That is true. This is dating related. Real estate will be in future posts. If you slide in a woman's DMs, the second question can't be, when can I take you out? I can agree with that, to be fair. You know what I mean? There should definitely be some sort of, some sort of familiarity, some sort of, time to get acquainted. Read the room, look at her photos, likes, comments. Based on that, do you think other men would be DMing her? Well, I can say as a man with any common sense, of course. If she's even somewhat attractive, then it goes without saying that women are always flooded with DMs. Her DMs are always full. As a matter of fact, there are some women who even make it a competitive sport for how many men they can leave on scene. So that goes without saying. So probably. So why on earth would she just agree to go out with your random self? Bops you on the forehead. So, ultimately, I think it depends on who it is. It's one thing to say that. I think that's more directed at the men who she's not interested in. Because if the right man comes along and he's packaged well, then I believe that that type of rule can slide. What you should do is find a common ground: work, school, mutual friends, sports, whatever. Bring that up first and then actually start a conversation. It's funny how a lot of people are closed off to conversation, especially women, which I get because perhaps they've been bombarded with, DMs and they've had negative experiences. But honestly, a lot of women also too will post stuff to be funny, but as I said, what you focus on expands, and your words do have power. I've seen posts where they'll say, I got this wrong with me, that wrong with me, and this wrong with me. Like, trust me, you don't want this. So automatically you're putting it out there like, don't bother me. So that to me is interesting when you talk about finding a common ground, because some people are just completely closed off to communication anyway, depending on who it is. Don't try to dumb down her lifestyle. Date your wage. This is interesting because it's always one way. It's always about, don't try to dumb down her lifestyle, but women never consider the idea that she could be having a man dumb down his lifestyle. That's always been interesting to me. So it says, if she goes with friends regularly to nice establishments, it's clear that's her vibe. Match her lifestyle and or date your wage. It's interesting because women are normally more concerned, or I should say way more concerned, with a man's wage than a man is with her wage, which is perfectly fine. I just want to point that out when you talk about date your wage, because a lot of times as men, we don't have a problem with, being someone who's well off, taking somebody out who works at Target. No shade whatsoever to anyone who works at Target. But since we're talking about dating your wage, a lot of times there's no problem for a man that makes 60, 70, 80,000 to take a woman out who might make 20, 30, 40,000 out. So I just find that interesting as far as date your wage. Another thing about that, though, when you talk about dating your wage, so you're essentially saying that the high end earners are the ones who are welcome. But if you're going to say that, that's fine, but also understand that that's why those particular men have options. So, moving on. Don't call her money bags, boss, baller, etc. Don't say you got it, high roller. Women equate this to you're broke or you're intimidated or you're looking for a sugar mama. If you make less than a woman, you can provide in other ways. I mean, that's a good thing because ultimately it shouldn't only come down to money, because if it only comes down to money, then it's only the high end earners who are going to have those options. And then women will be upset and say, well, why does this man entertain multiple women? Because he can afford to. The same way as the author referenced going back up, as far as a woman who looks like she would have many men in her DMs, she's able to be selective. So that man is able to be selective if the focus is on how much he earns, if that's strictly the focus, I should say. If you enter a door and she's behind you, you failed. I can agree with that. We should definitely be gentlemen. We should definitely do that. There's nothing wrong with that. Doesn't cost anything whatsoever. If she is walking to your car, get your lazy butt out. See, it doesn't even have to be that. It should be just get out and help her in, but whatever. Especially if she has on heels, a dress, or if your car is extremely low to the ground, or you have an SUV. Why don't you try getting in a low car in 5-inch heels with a dress on while holding your purse, while not trying to show your underwear to the world? Pro tip, if a woman is wearing a dress and you help her out, you also provide a barrier just in case the wind blows and lifts her skirt or something. But even if she is in jeans and flats, it's still helpful. Yes, that is a positive sentiment. There's nothing wrong with that. If you order before her, you failed. I could agree with that. I mean, ultimately, I think that women are more strict depending on, or I should say, women are more or less strict with that depending on who it is. If it's a man that checks all her boxes, she might be a little more relaxed as far as that rule about, whether or not he orders first, or if she orders, or if he decides to be assertive and orders for the both of you. Some people like that, some don't. But moving on, coffee dates. If you want to take a woman on a coffee date because you want a more affordable first date experience, I get it. Let me pause right there. It's not necessarily always about what's affordable. As the saying goes, just because you can doesn't mean you necessarily should. I believe that coffee dates, it's not just about the money, it's about the time that's invested. So for example, let's say you just want to get acquainted. You want to make sure there's chemistry, or you want to explore further. Honestly, a coffee date shouldn't be so repulsive if you're actually interested in the guy. Just like he's extending that to you because he's interested in spending time with you. It's a lot easier to leave a coffee date than it is to leave a dinner date. I believe that's a point of it that's missed. Here are suggestions that are slightly better than a coffee date. Happy hour at a high-end restaurant. Again, we're talking about whether or not there's a chemistry there. It's not just about money, and it shouldn't be a financial audit right off the bat, because if it is a financial audit, then once again, you're drifting towards those high-end earners who also have options. If you're okay with that, that is fine, but the same way that the woman who has options in her DMs, that man who's a high-end earner who doesn't mind spending, he also has options. It just goes with the territory. A fancy dessert experience like Ghirardelli or Sugar Goat. I mean, if you agree on that, that's fine. And ultimately, I'm not saying this person is wrong. I'm just offering an additional perspective. Mexican restaurant, but in a neighborhood that is largely known for their Mexican food. Tacos are traditionally cheap, and so are drinks usually. That's reasonable. I mean, that ultimately, it's not so much about the cost, it's about the time investment. So if the chemistry is not there, I would say as long as you choose something where neither side has too much involved and it's easy to walk away if there's not chemistry. But tacos are actually a good idea. You can't go wrong with tacos and margaritas. This was particularly interesting. It said, nobody wants to go for a walk with you or go to Starbucks. All I could say is, ouch. Ouch, ouch, ouch. That hurts. Nobody wants to go for a walk with you. You know, it's funny. People often talk about back in the days and like, where have all the good men gone? A lot of times back in the day with courting or what have you, walks were a big part of it, being able to go for a walk. So it's kind of crazy to hear somebody say, nobody wants to go for a walk with you. As a man, you could just as easily say, well, if you don't want to even go for a walk with me, then why should I invest heavily in a dinner date if you don't even want to walk the food off? You know what I mean? You don't want to even walk off the meal. Pro tip: highly sought after, busy women will always have the best suitors. Fair enough. Same goes for the men with those incomes, or whatever the case may be, whether they're over 6 feet or whatever qualities you find attractive. They'll also have the most suitors. So you will have to compete to a certain extent. May the best man win. Low effort never got anyone to the top. That goes both ways. I swear that goes both ways. You know, a lot of times it's always expected, and it should be expected of men to provide the best effort. But what about the effort on the other end? So if you don't even want to take a walk with me, that doesn't sound like, high effort to me. If any of this is too much for you, there is a simple fix. Don't do it. There is a shift. Women aren't dying to be in relationships anymore. Relationships are only worth it if it adds value to both parties. Exactly. It has to add value to both parties. So if you are even remotely interested, it shouldn't be such a big deal if you go on a coffee date. You shouldn't feel as though you're being slighted. It's simply to feel out chemistry. Taking a walk, that's nothing to do with finances. It's everything to do with, do you even want to spend time? But anyway, this has been another episode of Talk and Scroll. Y'all take it easy.